There is a factory in Ohio that can build a main battle tank from raw steel to a finished 60-ton machine, and it is one of the only places in the entire country that can still do it. It has done this for decades. It armored a nation. At its peak, it turned out tanks at a rate that would stagger you. Whole armored divisions rolled out of a single set of doors. In its busiest era, this one plant was a pillar of the most powerful land force on the planet, and everyone involved assumed that kind of work would continue, because surely a country always needs tanks. And you cannot buy it, not for any price, because the company that runs it does not own it. America's government owns the building, the land, and the machines inside it. A private defense company runs it under contract. And that arrangement, a government-owned contractor-operated plant, is the strange and revealing heart of one of the least understood businesses on Earth. Everyone assumes a tank factory is a license to print money. Guaranteed customer, no competition, the government always needs tanks. It sounds like the safest industrial business ever created. It is not. This plant has come within a whisker of going cold more than once, and the reason why is the whole story. Because a tank factory does not really sell tanks. It sells the ability to build them, and that is a completely different and far more fragile thing to own. Let me open the ledger. Because once you understand how this factory really works, you understand something most people never see. The businesses that look the safest, the ones with a guaranteed buyer and no competition, can be the most fragile of all. And a tank factory is the purest example of that paradox anywhere in industry. How it actually works. Start with the ownership, because it is unusual. A government-owned, contractor-operated plant means exactly what it says. Government owns the physical asset. Private company is paid to operate it, to manage the workforce, run the production, and deliver the product. A contractor does not own the factory it works in. It owns the contract to run it. That distinction sounds like a technicality. It is anything but. In a normal business, you own the factory, so you carry the risk and you keep the reward. Here, the company carries much of the operating burden, but owns none of the underlying asset. And the government owns the asset, but hands the daily reality of running it to someone else. Both sides are locked together, and neither can walk away easily, because the thing they are jointly keeping alive is too important to drop. Why would a government do this? Because some capabilities are too important to leave entirely to the market, and too specialized to run themselves. A nation that cannot build its own armor is dependent on somebody else's, and no serious military power accepts that. So the state keeps the factory and pays an expert company to keep it working, which means the thing being owned here is not really a building at all. It is a strategic capability, and capability behaves nothing like a normal product. The one customer problem. Here is where the safe business turns dangerous. A tank factory has, in practice, one customer: government. In some cases, a small number of approved foreign buyers, but always through tight political control. You do not open a tank factory and find new markets. There is exactly one buyer who is allowed to want what you make, and that buyer decides entirely on its own schedule whether this is a good year or a catastrophic one. No amount of sales skill changes that. You cannot advertise your way to a second customer, discount your way into a new market, or diversify into a friendlier industry. The order book is written in a government budget, revised by politics, and handed to you as a fact. In a normal business, the customer needs you as much as you need them. Here, the relationship is entirely one-sided, and the side holding the power is not yours. Think about what that does to the business. A normal factory with a slow month finds new customers. This factory cannot. When the orders slow, there is nobody else to sell to. When the government decides it has enough tanks for now, the most advanced armor plant in the country has nothing to build, and no legal way to replace the work. That is not a hypothetical. Tank production in America has, at points, dropped so low that the plant faced the real possibility of stopping entirely. The customer had enough tanks and paused. And pausing a tank factory is where the real money problem lives. The cost of staying warm. You would think an idle factory is a cheap factory. Turn it off, wait for the next order, turn it back on. Save the money in between. You cannot. And this is the single most important fact about owning this kind of plant. An expensive part of a tank factory is not the steel or the machines. It is the people. Welding a tank hull that will protect a human life under fire is a rare and certified skill. A workforce that can do it takes years to train and cannot be assembled overnight. If you let those people go during a quiet period, they find other jobs, other industries, other cities, and they do not come back. So when the next order arrives, you do not have a warm factory ready to build. You have an empty building and a workforce that has scattered, and rebuilding that capability can take years and enormous cost, assuming it can be done at all. This is why the plant is kept, in the language of the industry, warm, producing at a minimum sustaining rate, even when there is no urgent need for the tanks, purely to keep the skills, the suppliers, and the production line alive. A country is not buying those tanks because it needs them right now. It is paying to keep the ability to build them from disappearing. Say that plainly. A tank factory sometimes builds tanks nobody currently needs for one reason. Because the alternative, letting the capability die and trying to rebuild it in a crisis, is far more dangerous and far more expensive. This runs against every instinct a normal business person has. You are trained to cut production when demand falls, to shed cost, to wait for the market to recover. Do that with a tank factory, and you do not get a lean company ready to spring back. You get a dead capability that took a generation to build and will take another generation to replace. The rules that keep an ordinary factory healthy will quietly kill this one. Warm base cost is the real product. Tanks are almost a byproduct of keeping the lights on. The supplier trap. There is a second fragility underneath the first, and it is worse than most people realize. Tank is not built by one factory. It is assembled from thousands of specialized parts made by a deep chain of suppliers, many of them small, many of them the only company left that makes their particular component. When the main plant goes quiet, those suppliers lose their orders too. A small firm that makes one specialized part for one tank with no other market for it cannot survive a long pause. It closes. And when the order finally comes, that part cannot be bought at any price, because the only company that made it is gone. And these are not exotic parts you could improvise. A single, specialized casting, a particular gear, a specific piece of optics or electronics, each made by a firm that exists only because the tank program exists. Lose one of them, and the entire vehicle stops, held up by a component that used to cost a rounding error and now cannot be obtained at all. The chain is only as strong as its most forgotten link, and nobody notices that link until it snaps. So keeping a tank factory alive is not just keeping one building warm. It is keeping an entire fragile ecosystem of suppliers alive through the quiet years, every one of them a potential single point of failure for the whole machine. Factory is the visible part. Its supply chain is the part that quietly decides whether the factory can function at all. Who wins and who loses? So who actually makes money here and how? A contractor running the plant earns through the operating contract, not through selling tanks in a market. Their skill is managing a specialized workforce, delivering to an exacting standard, and keeping a strategic capability healthy through both busy and lean years. It is a real business, but it is a service business dressed as a manufacturing one. They are paid to run the nation's factory, not to own its output. Government pays for something that does not appear on any normal balance sheet. Insurance. That warm base cost is the premium a nation pays to guarantee it can build its own armor when it matters, rather than discovering in a crisis that the capability quietly died during peacetime. And the losers are always the same. History's worst moments are where a nation let its defense industrial base wither during a quiet stretch, then faced a sudden need and found the factories cold, the workers gone, and the suppliers closed. Rebuilding from that position costs vastly more than the warm base would ever have cost, and it costs time a crisis rarely allows. A tank cannot be conjured in the weeks a sudden emergency gives you. The steel, the skills, the suppliers, the certification, all of it takes years to reassemble from cold. A nation that let its plant die discovers at the worst possible moment that money cannot buy back time, and that the cheapest thing it ever declined to pay for was the quiet cost of keeping the factory warm. That is the lesson every serious military power has learned, usually the hard way. An expensive factory running slowly in peacetime is not waste. It is the cheapest insurance policy in national defense. The verdict. So, could you own a tank factory? No. And that is the point that makes this the strangest asset in the entire series. America's most important tank plant is not for sale, was never for sale, and never will be, because a nation does not sell the ability to defend itself. You can win the contract to run one if you are one of a tiny handful of companies on Earth trusted to do it. You cannot own one, and even the contract is not the golden ticket it appears to be. You are tied to a single customer who controls your entire order book on its own political timetable. You carry the enormous fixed cost of a skilled workforce that you cannot release without destroying the very thing you are paid to protect. You depend on a fragile chain of suppliers you do not control. And your busiest year and your emptiest year are decided in a government building you have never set foot in. Good years are extraordinary. A major program, a large order, foreign sales approved, the line running at full rate, the workforce fully employed, and a contractor delivering the most advanced armor on Earth. Bad years are brutal in a way no normal factory ever faces. Orders stop, the line runs at a trickle, the plant burns money staying warm, building tanks nobody urgently wants, and the whole enterprise survives only because a government decides the capability is worth more than the cost. Every other factory on Earth exists to make a product and sell it. Tank factory exists to make sure a product can be made at all on the day a nation suddenly, desperately needs it. That is why nobody can own it. You cannot put a price on a capability a country cannot afford to lose, and you cannot sell the one thing that must never be allowed to close. Tank factory does not sell tanks. It sells a promise that the tanks can be built, and that promise is the only thing keeping the lights on.